Yeah.
In the meantime, do you want to just explain who you are and maybe about Proco? I can explain who I am.
Yeah. So why don't I start this off? First of all, I'm Ryan Gridley. I play professionally with the Oakland Athletics organization. I went to Mississippi State University in Starkville, Mississippi, played in the SEC for 3 years, and then as a junior got drafted by the Oakland Athletics, and I've been playing with them since 2017. This is Jacob Robson. You want to take that away?
Yeah, Jacob Robson. I am with the Detroit Tigers, and I got drafted in 2016. I also went to Mississippi State University. That's how we know each other. Played together for a couple of years there. And I'm actually from Canada, so when I was in high school, I was a part of the men's junior national baseball team, and now when I can, if I have time and if the Tigers allow it, I play for the men's senior national team. So I've been playing baseball. I guess we've both been playing baseball ever since we could.
Yeah.
I also grew up playing hockey, other sports, so I have a little bit of a different perspective in terms of just kind of drilling baseball into your head or into the head of a young kid. But I've had some success coming from an area that's not necessarily baseball dominant, and I can share my story with you guys, or if anybody has any questions about that, I can share. But you can go ahead and explain about Proco.
Yeah. So before we get anything, I'm gonna ask you about Proco a little bit and what you do with that, and then I'm also gonna ask you about other sports that you played as well as other sports that I've kind of grown up playing and how those kind of correlated with baseball swinging and the movements that we have now. So I invented Proco Plus because what I would do every offseason is I would teach personal lessons with kids that are trying to learn the game at a high level. And then eventually, of course, all of us as professionals would leave for spring training, and then all of that communication would just stop. And that was tough for a lot of pros because you create this great relationship with a kid and you see them daily or weekly or whatever it may be, and you're constantly taking looks at their swings and their fielding positions and their movements, and then that communication just drops for like 6 months. So I was like, there's got to be a better way we can stop this barrier between professional baseball and these young kids. So I think what I'm really trying to do out of this whole thing is just give as good as information as I can to you guys. I think it's something that I wish that I had when I was growing up. My parents didn't necessarily play professional baseball or anything past high school, so I was constantly looking for more information, and what better way to get information than to contact people that are currently in the game.
Right. And so when Ryan was explaining to me, hey, I think I'm going to start this company and this is what the deal is, it just made so much sense to me, specifically because when I was growing up, I had to rely on, well, let me start over. When I was growing up, I wanted to be as good at baseball as I possibly could. It wasn't necessarily the first thing that was on my mind. I always loved baseball, I love all sports, but when I decided to be super serious about baseball, I knew I had to do work outside of just playing and practicing with my own team. I had to get lessons. I had to have someone with experience teach me the right way to do things, from mechanics to mental approach and, taking what the game gives you. There's just so much to baseball that is, I think, overlooked, and it's also miscommunicated. I think there's a lot of people out there who think they might know the best way to get to the big leagues, or they think they might know the best way to hit or throw, pitch, base run, but they themselves never played at an extremely high level. And so what better way to learn than to hear it from someone who has professional experience, who has college baseball experience, who's played in front of thousands of fans, and who's learned from very highly credible people. And to me, I heard this all from Ryan, and I was like, man, this is awesome. I wish I would have had it, because when I was growing up, we would go to the cage and whatnot. Of course, if you want to be a really good baseball player, you have to do work outside of practicing with your team and playing games with your team. You have to be training on your own, whether it's with your dad, whether it's with a couple of buddies, whatever it may be. You need to be doing more than, I guess, what's just required of you. So what I'm saying is, I was kind of searching around my area, and there just weren't highly credible people that I could go to and trust that I knew played, let's say in professional baseball, or let's say like really good college baseball, let alone the big leagues. So what I had to do was, I heard about there was a guy 2 hours away from me. He played in the big leagues. He played for Team Canada. He played college baseball. And I went to him. My dad drove me, like, I'm so grateful for this, both my parents, in supporting me for this. My dad would drive me 2 hours just to go hit and practice for like an hour and a half, and we drive 2 hours back same night. We wouldn't sleep over, and, you know, pay this guy whatever it was. I mean, it's not cheap. As you guys know, you guys are baseball moms, you guys know a baseball lesson is not cheap. You know, it might cost 60, 70, 80, 90, sometimes 100 or more, just for 1 hour of your son or daughter, if it's softball, being taught. So, and it may be by somebody who's not credible. Of course, I can't speak for every one of you. Some of you may have credible coaches in the area, but it's just like, this Proco Plus saves you the trouble of driving 2 hours away, paying some guy who you're not too sure if he's legit or if he's telling your son or daughter the right things. And then, you know, at the end of the day, you've lost a lot of time and a lot of money. This is like the same amount of money you pay for one session, basically, for an entire month of having access to a player. And there's so much more to gain than just 1 hour with a coach.
Yeah.
You know, if you feel like you need something, or if your son feels like he's not sure about something, it's just a quick message to the professional, and the professional gets right back to you. I mean, that's what they do. And for me, I enjoy it because I've learned so much, and I'm happy to share my experience with a kid. It's not a burden, and it's not troublesome at all. If anything, I feel good about myself because I know I'm spreading the right things, the right information. I've learned it from big leaguers. I've learned it from Hall of Famers. So, you know, being with the Detroit Tigers, there are Hall of Famers that used to play in the organization, that are still in the organization, maybe future Hall of Famers, that teach us things. So it's just like, man, I would have loved to have been talked to by a professional player, especially like a young professional who doesn't forget, who hadn't forgotten what it was like to be a kid.
I always appreciated when I could see somebody doing it. So I always had a difficult time with somebody that was trying to tell me, hey, your swing needs to look like this, but they couldn't actually show me what that was supposed to look like. Right. And there was a huge disconnect for me there when I was growing up. I grew up in Atlanta. It's a hotbed for baseball, getting recruited and everything, and I always had coaches that could kind of speak a little bit to me about some things, but I never got that visual that I was really looking for. So that's what I really wanted to provide, was because I continue to do this and I'm a professional player today and I'm constantly working on my craft, they can see what I'm doing day in and day out and gauge where they are compared to what I have. And the beauty about baseball is that we can go through so many different things, so many different types of swings and different stances to find what's right for you. There is no cookie cutter thing here. And that's what I witnessed a lot when I was growing up, playing in the East Cobb area or travel ball around Atlanta area. There was a lot of like, hey, we're going to focus on winning. We need you to hit a ground ball to the right side to get the guy over. It wasn't so much, hey, Ryan, maybe hitting a ground ball to the right side is not going to get you seen at all. Everyone's going to kind of write that off. Let's work on driving the ball here, but how do we get you to drive the ball? You know, there's a process that you need to have with your swing to be able to get in a position to be able to be a dominant hitter. And those are some of the things that I just never figured out until I got to be around players that were elite level players at college. And then I ended up picking up a lot of stuff and getting drafted myself. And now what I'd like to do is pass along that information to you guys. So I think that's a good opener right there, just to talk about a little bit about what we're trying to do, just trying to give good information. But let's talk a little bit about the difference between like Atlanta area getting ready for like college baseball and maybe Toronto or somewhere else in the country, because I'm sure there's other people out there that are curious, hey, maybe you live in a small town that you want to know what the right thing is?
Mm-hmm. So I'll just talk about from my experience. I am from a place where baseball is not the dominant sport. It's people are still baseball fans and they still enjoy the game. It's not like way up north. It's the southern part of Canada, so we still have a little bit of the American culture. But I think I can relate to some kids who don't have great facilities. They don't have great competition around them. But I can talk about how to overcome those things and still come out on top and get to the next level, really, when maybe you're not sure if you will. I think that it's really more about playing as many baseball games as you can. And even if your team only plays 20, 30 games a year because it's cold, that was the case for me. I tried to play on other teams, I would try and play on teams who are playing in the fall. Hey, is there a team that just plays in fall tournaments or just plays in the weekends in the fall? Can I do that? Do I have time to do that? I just wanted to get as many at-bats as I could and get as many in-game experiences as I could, because you can only practice so much. It's not like basketball when you shoot a bunch of shots in the gym, you're spending hours on hours in the gym, you're going to have an awesome shot. Baseball, you can go in the cage like every single day, have a great batting practice swing, crush balls off the tee, do whatever you want. But when there's a pitcher on the mound and he's trying to beat you, like some of that goes out the window. So I knew I needed to get a lot of reps in game. I knew I needed to play for other teams, maybe 2 teams at once, if I could. And I ended up doing that. When I was early on in high school, maybe 9th, 10th grade, I was in contact with another team that played outside of the schedule of my current hometown team. So I had to go, it wasn't far, but I had to go play for another team in the fall. They were playing fall games and my hometown team was not. So I knew I needed those extra reps, extra games. And so that's what I ended up doing. And I think it really helped me towards the end of my high school career going into college, because I was getting double the at-bats everybody else was for my age. So you can look at someone like me and go, oh, wow, he still made it. He defied the odds. Like, he must be, I guess that talented. Well, you can look at it like that. I look at it like I tried the best that I could to get the most reps. And I ended up getting more reps than anybody from my hometown. And I think that's part of the reason why I ended up making it so far in baseball. And that's why I'm still playing. So my advice would be, if you are not from an area with great competition, with many baseball games in a season, try and play for other teams, try and get in-game experience. Baseball practice, it's a great thing, of course, at a young age. It's a great thing to develop those fundamentals, those mechanics. But I think kind of as you get older, preparing for college, playing in those games is really important.
What about other sports? So I would love to touch on that because I know a lot of parents probably ask that. I'll give this, before I even start with this, I'm gonna give it over to him. But when I was in high school, I actually made the JV basketball team. I was probably going to be a varsity basketball player. I was a really good ball handler. And my coach at the time just said, hey, we don't want you on the basketball team. Can't risk you getting hurt, number one, and it's going to cut into our season, so we can't have you do it. Man, I really wish I played basketball. And I think that when you're playing other sports, you're adding so many other components that make you a better baseball player. I mean, I've said this before on the last Instagram Live we did. Athleticism is really what these people are looking for. They're looking for the best athletes and not necessarily the person that plays in 50 perfect game events and they have a 9.5 rating. Everyone's got a 9.5 rating for some reason. They're looking for the most elite athletes. And why don't you just kind of touch on what did hockey do for you and badminton and all these other things that you did that kind of made you a better athlete?
So growing up, I tried to play pretty much every sport under the sun. I grew a real liking to baseball, hockey, and volleyball. Those are my 3 main sports. I played a little bit of lacrosse too, but the lacrosse interfered with the baseball and hockey, so I kind of had to pick Usually people pick 2 at the most. I picked 3. I could coordinate going to practices and games and tournaments with all 3 of those sports. I played on travel teams for all 3 of those sports. So hockey was sort of my first love. You know, grew up skating, grew up on the ice, and you know, it's a tough sport. If you don't know about it, it's tough. You get knocked around, of course, but you really learn competitive nature. You really learn intensity. You learn how to take getting yelled at, you know, things like that you might not think of. It's more than just athleticism, balance, power. Of course, I learned those things. Endurance. Those are very important for any sport, and they helped me, especially like wrist strength, you know, rotational power. When you shoot a hockey puck, it's a rotation. It's a rotational action, and the quicker you can get your hips through, it's almost like swinging. The quicker you get your hips through, the quicker the bat comes through and whatnot. But I think more than anything, I learned stuff that wasn't necessarily physical. I learned how to get yelled at and take it. You know, that's just, if you want to play college baseball, that's probably what's going to happen.
Better figure it out quick.
And if it doesn't happen, then that's pretty rare. Professional, there's a lot less yelling, but if you want to make it through college baseball, you're going to have to learn how to take constructive criticism and not take offense to someone raising their voice at you. That's something I learned in hockey. That's just one sport, and if you guys have any questions about that, I can go into further detail about that. I could go all day talking about hockey and how it helped me. But the other sports that I played, volleyball. My mom played volleyball in university, and so she taught me how to play from a young age, and I fell in love with it. I got into travel volleyball as soon as I could, as early as I could. So I played on the travel team and I played on my school team. That's like a very explosive, powerful sport. You learn strategy. You learn how to read the defense. You learn how to make very quick decisions. And so I think that really, really helps. Hitting is all quick decisions, split-second decisions. It's instinctual. You know, it happens in the blink of an eye. Volleyball is the same way. If you guys have watched, you know, really competitive volleyball, college, professional, I mean, those guys hit the crap out of the ball. You don't have any reaction time. You need to be thinking steps ahead, like a chess game. And so baseball is very similar to that. And not to mention, you're jumping, running, you know, you're quick on your feet, agile, and you have great endurance playing volleyball. Those are things that still take with me. I still pride myself in the ability to be springy, jump high, really quick on my feet and light on my feet, being able to change directions. So those are things that I learned that I wouldn't necessarily have learned just playing baseball. And I'm not telling you how to parent your kid, to take them out of sports or to put them in sports. Of course, if your kid doesn't want to play a certain sport, then I don't think they should be forced to. But if they want to play multiple sports at once, I would completely encourage that. There are so many multi-sport athletes that are excellent and elite, and they go down in the Hall of Fame, multi-sport. There's basketball guys who used to play football or baseball. You know, baseball guys used to play basketball, football, and whatever it may be. So I think playing multiple sports really, really helped me, and it also contributed to the fact that, like I said, you could say about my previous point, you could say, oh, well, he barely played any baseball games. How did he make it? Yeah, I maybe played less than you did, but I was doing other stuff that was totally helping my career. So there are two ways to look at it, and I think it completely helped me athletically, on and off the field, get to where I'm at today.
Yeah, so for me, I played tennis and I played basketball competitively growing up. My sister played tennis in college, so that was something that we were doing every single weekend. Really, what I would do in the fall is go to tennis tournaments and travel around and compete at a really, really high level. And then I would also in the winter go play basketball, spring play baseball. So there was constant sports all the time. And I think the best thing about that was really just the friendships that I made. It wasn't necessarily like, hey, I got to develop this. I was never thinking about that. That was just something that was happening along the way. The only thing that I was thinking about is, man, I'm meeting all these awesome guys that I now still stay in contact with. So I think that's the main thing to think of, especially at a young age. Just think about the friendships and memories that you're going to be creating with that, with those wins and losses and those great moments where your son or daughter gets that hit in the clutch situation. That's the thing that they'll remember forever. You never really, for me, I rarely remember any negative errors or losses. I remember the great moments over and over, and I replay those in my mind. So for me, that was something that was great to think back on growing up, and I still hold those with me today. As far as like sporting wise and physicality and what that helped me with,
keep going.
Basketball and tennis are great because the lateral side to side movements are so crucial in those sports. And if you think about in baseball, I'm a middle infielder. I have to be able to move laterally very quickly and make decisions on when I'm supposed to come get a ball, when I'm supposed to sit back on a ball. Same thing hitting wise. If I'm playing tennis, am I supposed to finesse a shot somewhere? Am I supposed to get my swing in a certain position? And those things, I believe, really helped me become a more elite athlete, and I was able to adapt it and move into baseball with those same features. So yeah, I definitely think that that's something that you guys should do as well, is play as many sports as possible. Just see what you like. I mean, you'll never know what kind of friends you're going to make doing that as well. So should we answer this person's question right here?
Sure.
Okay, so one question would be, with younger players, how do you keep them loving the game when they aren't the best or having a hard time with something?
Younger players, how do you keep them loving the game? How did you guys personally deal with coaches who didn't have your...
Well, I think we covered that second piece after this. Let's just cover the first one.
I would just encourage my kid. Look, if your kid wants to be a professional athlete, that's amazing. If they don't, that's fine too. I think that people shouldn't do what they don't want to do. I think they shouldn't pursue a sport if they don't want to. But if they want to, even better. We're good guys to talk to with that. In this case, if they're not the best player and they still want to play and they still love the game and they still see themselves as being a professional baseball player, I would encourage them that, hey, you're not the best right now, but if you continue to work, you're going to get way better. You're going to get way better.
Where would you say you were at that young age compared to like some of the other guys? Because for me personally, I was like very middle of the pack. I was a good player, but there was always 5 guys or so that were way better than me. And then eventually as you move up, some of those guys filter out because they're not understanding what they need to work on, or
they don't want to do the extra work.
And you pass them up. So go ahead. Yeah, I just thought I'd add that.
Yeah, I think that, usually the best player when you're 10, 11, 12 years old is not going to be the best player in the end, because usually that kid is the biggest, most mature physically, and they have the biggest advantage. When I was growing up, I was tiny, by far the smallest on my team, no matter what sport. I was not the worst player on the team, but I was definitely not the best player. I would not have been voted best player if we did any of that. I never won like tournament MVP, anything like that when I was growing up. That being said, of course, I was always pretty good. I wouldn't say when I was 9, 10, 11, 12, even 13, 14 years old, you could have pointed me out and said, that guy's going to play in the big leagues, that guy's going to play in the SEC, that guy's going to get drafted. For me, things happened later in terms of like physicality. I got a little bit more physical later, but I always kept the faith, and I always understood, yeah, I'm smaller, or maybe I'm not the best, but if I continue to work, I just stayed positive. If I continue to work, I know that I'll eventually bypass these kids. And what happened in my experience in every sport, usually the best kid just ended up quitting. He didn't end up sticking it out, and maybe that's because he didn't want to play, which is fine, or maybe it's because for whatever reason.
I think there's something to be said for somebody that recognizes that they need to be working on something and they continue to do it even though it's hard. I mean, for me, don't get me wrong, we have things that we're continuing to work on every day, all right? So for me, my running form is not the best running form. I'm a quick guy, but my strides are not exactly where they need to be, and it's really difficult. Jacob's one of the fastest guys I know. His form is incredible, so I'm learning a lot from him, and when he teaches me something or tells me I'm doing something wrong, it's difficult because you feel like, wow, I'm never going to figure this out. You get down. But there's something to be said about somebody that continues to pursue something, even though it's really hard and you're not the best at it yet. Because if you have a belief in yourself and you think you can really do something, you have so much a better shot of actually coming out of that with that knowledge gained. So I think, is there anything that you feel like you are learning right now that it's hard?
For me, it's just like controlling my body with my swing. I mean, we do the ground ball stuff and whatever, but I think my biggest thing is like my body gets out of control when I swing. And I'm 25 years old. I would say I'm on the cusp of the big leagues, and I'm admitting this now. I mean, it's still something that I have to work on, and I have to continue to clean up. I think life would be a lot easier for me if I was a little bit more controlled physically when I'm hitting, when I'm swinging the bat. And so, yeah, being quick and agile and speedy, those are all advantages in baseball. But if you can't control that, it makes something like hitting, extremely difficult. So I'm constantly having to work on that. I'm constantly having to monitor myself. And I know there are guys out there with picture-perfect swings, and they don't necessarily have to work as hard on that. But I find myself having to really, really work on that. And I know for a fact, because, I'm older now, and I've learned that if you put your mind to something, especially when it's something that's in your field, the sky's the limit. And I truly believe that. Another thing too for me is throwing. I don't have the best arm in the world. And I know that I can get a lot more out of my arm, and it's something that is just a process for me. And of course, I don't have a bad arm. It's not the worst arm on the field, but it's something that I really want to improve on. And there are people who are a lot better at it than me. But that doesn't mean I'm going to not pursue it. That doesn't mean I'm going to get down in the dumps and just give up on it. I think keeping positivity, Amy, this is your question. My answer would be keeping positivity and ensuring your kid that if he or she works hard enough, trust me, like they'll make tremendous gains, and people will fizzle out. They really will. It's not always about who's best when they're young. Like I said, though, that mature kid doesn't always end up being the best kid when everybody becomes an adult or goes towards the end of high school.
I think we should just include this next part of her question. So she says, how did you guys personally deal with coaches who didn't have you and your teammates' best interest, meaning winning over development? That's something that strikes home with me. So I'll just run into this really quick. I've been going on these forums and these groups lately to try to help people as much as I can, especially during this time. And I'll try to give decent information out there. And a lot of dads or parents or coaches will go on there and just try to debunk everything you say. There's only negative comments that are coming from these people. But when you ask them, can I see a video of what you're talking about, or can you explain it a little bit better? They just want to continue to do negative things and bring people down. And for some reason, I've seen that since I was a young player all across the board from coaching. That is something that I want to get rid of completely, and that's why I'm on here doing this. I want to give the most accurate information, and I don't think it's good to shame anybody, There's things that everyone needs to work on, and there's no reason that somebody should be shamed about it. There's a certain way to go about developing somebody without bringing them down and making them feel insignificant. So for me, that always struck home with me. When somebody would come after me as a player, instead of saying in a loving way, I really care about you, I believe that you can do this, let's try to work on this together. That goes so far with a young player compared to, you got no chance in the world to hit the ball right now. I don't even know why I put you on this team. Right. That's the type of stuff that I would hear all the time growing up. It just made absolutely no sense to me. Do you have that kind of growing up as well?
For sure. I mean, there are always going to be doubters no matter what you do in life. There are always doubters. I'm sure there are guys now who I grew up playing with or against that say, oh yeah, he was never that good. I don't know how he made it, And when I was growing up, I had plenty of coaches. I mean, when I was when I was in high school, I think I was 16, 17 years old, I got cut from my hometown team. Seriously, I was cut from my hometown team. And then like 2 months later, so I went to go play for another team in a neighboring city. And like 2 months later, maybe even less, I was on Team Canada and I was a starting center fielder. And so it's just one person's opinion. And if you have a specific coach that doesn't have your interests in his mind, or the team's best interest in his mind, it's just, for me, of course, it sucked to hear that. Oh, we don't think we want you this year, and, keep working and get bigger and stronger. Maybe next year you can play for us. This is what the team told me. I was like, you know what? I have ability, and I know that, and I'm confident in myself. What team I play on doesn't really matter. I'm going to keep playing baseball. I'm going to keep having fun. This is what I love to do. So I just kept my self-confidence up. And I really focused on that, and I focused on having fun and enjoying the game, playing the game for the right reasons. And I can't even count how many people who probably doubted me at that time, and probably still doubt me.
do. I mean,
There's always going to be people against you in life, no matter what you do. And it's important to not let that affect your self-confidence. I think that's so key, especially in a game of failure. That is baseball. Getting a hit, not getting a hit 7 times out of 10 will lead you to the Hall of Fame. So if you have a coach that doesn't believe in you and you're not getting hits, it's a bad recipe, especially if you let that hit your self-confidence.
And think about how hard that is for a young kid, too, that is just starting to love the game, and then they get that thrown on them. That'll take away so many players that could be great players, So for me, I use every piece of that to my advantage. That was something that I took into college. When I was getting recruited to Mississippi State, I remember some of my high school teammates being like, "Oh, did you walk on there? Or, you're gonna find a JUCO after that?" And I'd just be like, "What are you talking about? I'm gonna start as soon as I get there." And that was something that I brought in there, and then I ended up doing that, and I didn't have the best first season. And then some people would say, he's gonna be just an okay player, and I ended up being an all-SEC shortstop getting drafted, and that just came down to me believing in myself no matter what other people were saying or what other people thought, no matter how high up they were. I'm sure there were coaches that recruited me that didn't think that I was going to be as good as I was. Mm-hmm. Just as there's people right now in my minor league system that probably don't believe that I have a chance to make it to the big leagues, and my goal is to use that to prove them wrong. And then continue to use that when I get to the big leagues to prove those next people wrong. It will never stop. I don't think that ever stops in the work world or anything. I think that competition and that doubt from other people will always be there, and you have to find a way to use that to your advantage, but also spread positivity through that and not be disrespectful, because I've found myself being disrespectful. If I thought somebody was, doubting me, I would use that and get upset at it, but you have to find a way to be respectful and positive to other people and not dish out what you didn't want on yourself in the first place. So I hope that answers your question, Amy. We could talk on that forever, but...
There's some comments here.
Okay, yeah. So we can see some of your comments now. We're going to go ahead and read through some of these and get back to you guys. Just a second.
Sorry, we're just reading these now, so we hope the people who asked the questions are still listening. This would be the first question. I guess in order to get through these, we have to be relatively brief.
Yep. Yeah, that's fine.
If you have, if we answer a question and there's more you want, just message us. We'll answer.
Yeah.
So we got no problem answering.
You guys continue to ask questions. That's completely fine. We want to do this for you guys so you feel like you're getting all the information you can.
Yeah. So this is from Kim. Kim says, "What's your thoughts on younger kids 8 and 9 and it being so competitive?" So you can go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, my area was super competitive. We had walkout songs with huge speakers playing during 8-year-old games, and it was really fun. I think some of the parents that are dads that have never played, or moms or whatever, they get super into it because they think little Johnny's going to the big leagues when he's 8 years old. I think that at that age, you're just trying to have fun. All it is like I said before, your friendships that you're creating are the most important things, and the memories that you create are the most important things. It is not about whether Johnny went 8 for 20 or whatever in the tournament. We got to make him better because scouts are going to realize in the next 2 years. Nobody's looking at that. Mm-hmm. They just want, all we care about is how are we developing our friendships? Is our kid having fun doing this? And I don't. That's really it for me. What about you?
Well, I think maybe putting it this way might be a good way to relate back in the future. When I was young, I had a blast playing. I had good buddies on the team. You know, we won games, we lost games. We learned to deal with that. I learned the fundamentals of baseball, mechanics, what to do, what not to do, basics. But more than anything, I had fun, and that ties into your point. But my next point is, we get so caught up, even now, if I'm in a slump or if something happens in an at-bat where I'm upset, I have to remind myself, hey, remember why you play the game. You know, it's to have fun. It's because you love it, and it's because it's one of the greatest things to do is play baseball, in my opinion. So I constantly remind myself, remember why. And I think I established that foundation of why I played the game when I was a young kid. And there will be coaches that are super competitive and maybe not willing to play everybody. That's just something that comes with the territory. I think maybe if your son is not playing, if he's like a bench player on his team, it might be worth looking into maybe moving teams or maybe talking to other coaches who are willing to play everybody, because it's, of course, learning to be a bench player when you're older is different than starting off on the bench.
Right.
If you start off on the bench, it's tough to really find that joy and love for the game. Of course, there are a lot of avenues in baseball that aren't just being a baseball player, and that's totally separate. But I think establishing that foundation of the reason why you play the game, and that's to have fun, and it's because it's awesome. And I have to remind myself that to this day.
Same.
So I think that's the way I would put that answer. Jessica, do you think college baseball players will take advantage of the extra year of eligibility? And will it affect the next few years of scholarships for high school baseball players looking to play in college?
Yes and yes, right?
Yeah, I think...
I think it depends on what round. Number one, if you're a draft-eligible player, it's going to depend on if you're going to get drafted in those 5 to 10 rounds, whatever MLB decides. And then those players that were fringe players of getting drafted, they're going to come back 100% because they're not going to sign for whatever the threshold is. I think it's $20,000. I don't think they're going to sign for that if they're a decent player. So you're going to find a lot of really, really good players will actually come back this year, and you'll find a lot of really talented high school players will go to college as well. And there's going to be a mashup of really talented players in some teams. It'll be interesting to see, especially with there's limited roster spots, as you guys know, for these college teams. It's going to be a difficult process for a college coach to make decisions of who's going to be starting, who they're going to have to tell, hey, we might have to redshirt you this year, whatever. That'll be interesting to see play out.
Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns. We're both out of the NCAA. It's a weird thing to think about. I think it's just one of those things you got to roll with the punches. I think that's what everybody's doing right now with this whole thing. And all you can do is try your best, work as hard as you possibly can, try and perform the best that you can. And, I like to say the cream rises. If you feel like you're not being scouted, maybe go back to working harder or doing more. And maybe there's more you need to do, looking in the mirror, realizing what am I not good at.
Or smarter, too. I mean, a lot of people are like, I'm hitting 1,000 balls a day. Well, you're practicing the wrong swing, and you're embedding the wrong swing in your body and your movements in your brain, so you're even getting worse. I mean, there's a fine line in both those categories.
That's a good point. The second part of the question is, will it affect the next few years of scholarships for high school baseball players looking to play in college? Did you answer that?
I think I said yes and yes, right?
Yeah, I think yes, it will, but I also think that it's not something to dwell on because it's not really in your control. It's not really in the player's control. All the player can do is what he's always been able to do, is work hard, improve his game, fill up any holes that he has in his game. And I think if you do those things and you perform well enough, colleges will recruit you and you'll still end up getting your scholarship.
The best will play every time. The best will always rise. I mean, like you just said, that's the way it is. And it will always be, you can complain about it all you want if you're not playing in college. You know, I always hear, well, my coach screwed me. That was my favorite one. Well, no, you just batted 087, and the reason you got 9 at-bats is because in the fall when they were testing you out, you hit 100, you know? Like, there's got to be something that you show them to make them say, okay, we got to test him out even further. Going to give him another opportunity, and eventually you take whoever it is spot and you move forward.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely more of like a further down the line thing. But when your son or daughter is at a young age and they're not playing in the game, you know, it might be worth thinking about, do I need to play for another team, something like that. You know, blaming it on the coach at a young age, maybe sometimes it is the coach's fault because some of them are just kind of inexperienced dads, and you know, I can speak to that. We've all had that, a coach like that we just didn't agree with. But yeah, I think growing as you progress your career into high school and looking at college in the future, and you're not getting recruited, it's just one of those things. It's a harsh reality of life. Is you have to look in the mirror. You have to realize, I'm not doing something, or I'm not as good at something as they want me to be. So maybe asking somebody, we are people to ask for that. You know, when I was growing up, I would have loved to have someone like myself or like Ryan to lean on and say, what do I need to improve on? I want to get a scholarship, you know, or I want to play on a really good travel team. Let's say I'm not old enough to get a scholarship yet. I want to play on the best travel team in my city. What do I do? Check it out. This is what I think I'm good at. This is what I think I'm not so good at. Asking people for advice who are credible is very important, and that's what I did. That's what totally helped me get my scholarship that I ended up getting drafted out of high school, getting drafted out of college, was depending on these credible people. But if they're not credible, you might be getting the wrong information.
Right.
So I think that's what we provide, another thing that we provide.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I was getting recruited to colleges, one of the assistant coaches said, hey, you should talk to a player that's currently playing right now. And that player was Adam Frazier. He was a shortstop from my Atlanta area, and I remember getting on the phone with him for like an hour and a half. And we just talked about what the town was like, what the coaches were like, what was the situation like as far as like defense, middle infield wise, what could I learn from them hitting wise. And that really helped me make a decision on where I wanted to go to college. So I think just having somebody that's a mentor is a really big deal. Why don't we see if we can hit up that next question?
That might be it.
Is that it right there? Let's see. Okay.
I think that's it.
Any advice for a high school player? You want to just talk about that one a little bit? I mean,
I would say, like what we've been saying,
yeah.
Get as many reps as you can, get as many at-bats as you can, or if you're pitching, of course there's a fine line, but you need to get on the mound, you need to play games if you want to make it as a pitcher. You know, of course, if you throw too much at a young age, like that could be bad for your arm, but more than anything, if you want to be an elite baseball player, you need to play a lot of baseball games.
Right.
And when you're not playing in those games, you need to be getting information or lessons from a credible source. So you can't just be going to your team practice if you want to rise above the rest of your peers.
What do you think about strength and conditioning at a younger age as far as learning movements so that they know how to do those movements at higher weights, quicker speeds, and develop quicker? I think a lot of parents, I think there's a misconception on strength and conditioning, mobility work at young ages because everyone fears that, well, my growth plates aren't necessarily in place or whatever it may be. I don't want him to get hurt. I don't want him to be sore for practice. I mean, these are all things that I used to think about. I was not necessarily a gym rat growing up, and now that I realize how much it helps my game, that's one of the biggest things that I focus on. In season, out of season, I'm constantly focusing on how do I make my body move more efficiently. So do you want to just touch a little bit on what you think? Let's talk about a little bit of like a younger, maybe a middle school player should be doing as far as strength and conditioning. compared to a high school player, compared to a college? I think we can finish out with that unless you guys have any other questions you want us to run through.
Yeah, I think below middle school and maybe even into middle school, it depends on the person. Honestly, if they're not the best athlete, then they need to be doing some sort of strength and conditioning. But if they're playing multiple sports and they're athletic, they're one of the most athletic kids out there, I don't know if getting in the weight room is the best thing. I would say it's a case by case thing. But I would say maybe not lifting a ton of weight, but just understanding how to exercise your body the right way to optimize your play on the field. When you're a young kid, you don't need to be squatting 135 pounds, but maybe understanding basic movements, understanding how your body needs to be aligned with certain movements. Definitely mobility. Mobility is huge. More than anything, your child needs to be mobile if they want to optimize themselves, if they want to decrease chance of injury. That's what I would start with, because that's a great foundation to strength.
Yeah, I would do this if I'm a young middle schooler. If I can go back, I would personally just focus on not putting as much weight as I could on bars or increasing my weight every week, but how perfect can I get my form on the lifts that I know I will want to increase when I get older. Mm-hmm. Because you're not stressing your body at all by learning those movements. And I think that's something that everyone could do. Even during this time, we could be finding ways, and we also offer that through Proco Plus, is we have trainers that are professional baseball trainers that I work with or have worked with in the past that I've assembled for you guys, where they would go through, okay, these are the movements that we believe that you should do after assessing, giving you a pre-assessment on what you do, and then they come up with something that's effective depending on what you guys have. So I think that's really smart if you're a young player to not just sit there and, do nothing because I'm afraid I'm going to get hurt, but let's do some things that not necessarily going to make you get hurt or risk injury at all, but they're actually going to help you down the road prevent that injury. I think that's something that my parents didn't really understand because we weren't a part of the game, but now that I've seen this for years now, I think that's something I would go back and certainly do. Now, why don't we move on to like high school years?
I also want to say this too. It's important even in middle school. Your child needs to be doing sprints. Needs to be running as fast as they can. They need to be doing things like plyometrics, jumping, running drills. And these are things that I offer with my track background. I have a track background. My parents both do. And I train under the men's national sprint coach, Team Canada sprint coach. So I've learned a ton, and I definitely know your kid, he might not pick up a weight, but if he's in middle school and he wants to be the best that he can be, he needs to be running sprints, and he needs to be doing plyometrics. So it's like anything type of jumping, explosive movements, not necessarily with weight. And then the mobility, I think those three things are really important. Another thing too would be like hand-eye coordination stuff. That would be great. Juggling, bouncing, tennis balls, things like that. And then balance.
Yeah.
Balance exercises, maybe throwing a ball back and forth, balancing on one foot. These are just basic things, but guys like me and Ryan, we've gone through that. We do that still. We still do
every day
exercises like that. So we can provide a ton of insight on that department. If you guys have any questions with that, we can talk about it. And I know that there's the spectrum of your children's age is wider, so some of your kids might be in high school, some of them might be really, really little. So we're happy to talk about it case by case with your kid. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Anyway, that would be the middle school thing. I think high school, getting in the weight room, starting to move some weight around, especially on the lower body, isn't a bad thing at all.
Yeah.
So
definitely,
I would say lower body over upper body, but it's not a bad thing to do full body stuff either.
I personally think all of it. As soon as you get to high school and you start recognizing that I've hit puberty a little bit and I'm starting to grow into my body, you see those signs. I think that is a perfect time to start adding weight that you can handle every time. And there's certain patterns that we do as far as baseball, from off season to in season. We might hit up the strengthened speed curve, right? We talk a lot about that. Maybe we're a little bit more strength if we have like 3 months until we're in season, and then we get to season and we do a lot more speed with a little bit of strength in between there. I mean, there's just different things that we utilize depending on where we're at, and I think that you guys should do the same thing, but the weights will be different depending on where you're at in your physicality and everything, and what your experience is.
Functional training is very important. Baseball specific, rotational specific exercises are very important. It's not a bodybuilder thing where you try and put as much weight up as you can, try and get, huge pecs, huge shoulders. That's not going to help you on the baseball field. Being really quick, being explosive, being rotationally quick, being quick on your feet, agile, stable, being able to change directions, explosiveness. Those are all very important things that baseball focuses on. And we've been through, you've been through a ton of strength and conditioning programs. We both have, to the point where we don't have anything planned when we go into the weight room. We just walk in and just decide what we're going to do, because we've had so many programs and we understand, the best exercises depending on the day to work on. So, we can provide insight on that as well. It's not so much of a football, get huge, gain as much weight as you can. That's not always the case for if you want to optimize yourself. Some kids, yes. Some kids need to work on gaining a ton of weight. Some kids need to lose weight. So it's a case-by-case thing. Talking to someone who's credible about it. What does my son need? This is not just a strength and conditioning thing. It's a baseball thing. Mm-hmm. If you want to be an elite baseball player, you need to work out to be an elite baseball player.
Case by case. I mean, some players need to develop speed over strength, totally. and that's what I mean by case by case. Everyone needs to develop explosiveness. So, like, what's the equation for power? Do you know?
Force times
acceleration, right? I think
that sounds right.
I think that's what it is. Okay,
I'm removed from.
Didn't get his degree yet. He hasn't gotten his degree yet. Neither
the first half of it. Said the first half.
Okay, all right. So if you combine those two things, right? If we're gonna swing as fast as we can with as much force and power behind that, that's what baseball really is. So that's what we need to focus on in the weight room, and that's what we do. I kind of run through, for example, what I did today. I started off my day by working on my mobility, making sure that I was ready to go by doing an active warm-up and creating those muscles or prepping those muscles to be ready to use. For me personally today, what I did was just an upper body. So in order to do that, I would make sure that my shoulders were open to the point where I felt like if I was going to use them in the motion that I was going to use them, I wouldn't hurt any piece of my shoulder or anything. And then I would gradually work up to weights after I did some type of explosive twist action, whether that may be some like med ball throws or tosses or slams or something. I would work on some type of kettlebell rotation with my shoulder where I can feel my shoulder kind of going in its socket around to make sure that that was ready to go as well. And then when I got to my power piece, then I could really load up because I felt like I was ready for that. And then my next couple exercises would be some type of core explosiveness to another power drill. So we're mixing back and forth to make sure I'm hitting all those things. And I know that you do those things as well. When I watch you, you're focusing on those things, but it's different for you. Do you want to kind of run through a little bit about what that would look like?
Yeah, I try and mix a really, really quick explosive exercise with light weight with kind of a heavy, powerful exercise. Yeah. So if I do that, it's similar to what you do. I mean, we don't exactly do the same exercises, but it's a very similar program, I'd say, that we run. Developing a strong, explosive core to rotate, hitting, throwing, that's baseball. So those type of exercises have to be in your workout. Understanding your way around the weight room is really important too. I know we're just talking about specific weight workouts, but, getting a feel for how to work out, how much time needs to be taken in between sets. These are all things your kid is going to learn with a good trainer and with someone who knows what your kid needs to work on. So,
right.
Yeah, that's.
Let's see if we have any more questions, and we'll lock this down, and we're just going to take a second to review anything if we can see anything on here.
I think that may be it.
Let's just say before I don't want to leave anyone hanging.
Oh, there's some more.
Wow. Okay.
We're trying to find a select team that will develop. It seems they are all competitive.
What age do you recommend going to travel ball? I think that all depends on the skill level of your kid and also the amount of money that you have, because travel ball you're going to find is a lot more money. I mean, you're going around to different tournaments. It's a lot more competitive. Once you get out there and you start playing teams from other areas, it gets really fun and it gets a lot more serious. I love that aspect. When I started to do that, I started to meet awesome guys that I still connect with. So I think that's case by case again. But I think the sooner that you put yourself into higher competition, the better you're going to be as a player. I mean, I would play up classes just to face better players. Even though I wasn't one of the best players, I was learning a lot by seeing what those other guys are doing. And then I felt like, okay, I got to do this to get to that spot. So I think it's a great idea to get as competitive as possible.
I think trying to play at the highest level possible is a great thing, especially because if your kid wants to go play in college, when he's 18, he's going to be playing against 21-year-olds. They're already going to be older than him, and those kids played at the highest level when they were younger. So I think if your kid is serious about baseball and he communicates that to you, then getting him in the highest level is a great thing. And of course, if they just want to play for fun, that's fine too. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, like I said earlier in this, don't do something you don't want to do. I don't want to be a broadcaster. I don't want to be an author. You know, so I'm not going to do it. I want to be a baseball player. I've wanted to be a baseball player for a long time now. So, like I said, if your son doesn't want to do that, if your son doesn't want to be a multi-sport athlete, that's fine. But I think that discouraging any of that is not a great thing either. So,
all right, so what else you got?
A young kid is showing to be a switch hitter. What's the best way to help him stay a switch hitter?
I wish I was a switch hitter, honestly. I mean, the one thing that I wish, if I could go back, I wish I was a lefty. Because there are so many hard-throwing righties, and we were talking about this today, just our past experiences facing breaking balls from the same side. You see so many more hard righties throwing hard sliders away from a right-handed bat. If I was a lefty, that would help so much. And if you're a switch hitter, you're never really having to deal with that ball moving away from you other than a sinker or a changeup. So it gets really hard when people are throwing 95 to 100 miles an hour with really tight spin on a breaking ball going away, because sometimes you can't see that spin and you swing and it's in the dirt. And that's why some of you guys, you go to the Braves game or whatever, Oakland or Detroit game, and you start saying, why is he swinging at that pitch? It's because he can't actually see the spin. You see spin a lot better if it's running into your barrel. So if I could, I would go back right now. If I had time in my life, I would start working on switch hitting right now. I just didn't have that ability. So if you have any type of ability in that, can't hurt to just work on it. I mean, even if you're just working on it in the cage, I mean, it's just it's an asset for a coach too. And I see this all the time. If we have a player that's a pretty decent hitter and he's a switch hitter, they start to fall in love with that player because they realize how valuable that is in a lineup. When somebody tries to bring on a left-on-left matchup or right-on-right matchup, that's not going to work for that player.
Neither of us are switch hitters, but we both played with really good switch hitters. And the one thing that I learned was being a switch hitter is like having two different swings. It's like being two different people. You have to train both swings. So I understand that if you're a little kid growing up, most of the pitchers you face are going to be right-handed. So you're going to hit lefty most of the time. Getting those right-handed at-bats, reps with those at-bats, is going to be difficult. So I would say you may have to throw to him left-handed or get somebody who can throw left-handed to him. As he gets older, he's going to face some more lefties so he can go ahead and hit righty. But I think if he wants to be a switch hitter, continuing to get reps on both sides. Maybe if you don't face a lefty that day, you go in the cage and you hit right-handed. Even if it's just in practice, fine-tuning both swings. It's like having two players. And
yeah,
that's what I've.
It's a lot more work.
It's a lot of work. You got to take a lot of swings, but at the same time, it's a huge advantage to be a switch hitter. So. this is not so much of a
Thanks,
question.
guys. Watching with my 13-year-old in Perth, Western Australia. He just started his plyometrics training this morning and has been working hard on agility and will add balance to his routine. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean,
is awesome.
That's what we love to hear is just any, type of positive feedback. This is why we're on here. We want to make you guys feel like we're breaking down the barrier here between professional baseball and youth baseball. I mean, I don't think there should be a barrier at all. I wish there was better ways to get connected with everyone. So hopefully we can continue this.
Stacy asked.
Yeah. Which do you recommend, travel or rec ball for kids under 12? Any specific age or game reps more important than skill level? You want to start off with that one?
Yeah, if they are really serious about it, I would say try and get them at the highest level as soon as possible. That's going to be the easiest way to transition year to year, because ultimately you're going to be playing against each other, or going to be playing against people older than you, competing for a spot against people older than you. So why not get used to it if they're serious about it?
Yeah.
So any specific age or game reps more important than skill level? I would say the only time I would switch teams would be if your kid is not playing consistently. I would say getting consistent reps with the best team that he can, that's the combination for optimizing improvement and development. So that would be my answer to that one.
What are some good drills to practice at home for ground balls and pitching? I'll go ahead and harp on the infield stuff. I personally start my day off with a lot of just hand stuff, focusing on my action with my hands and how I'm moving through a baseball towards first base. And I'm happy to personally run through those things with anyone that wants to try me out. I think I have somebody right now that's watching this, Stacy, that's signed up with me. And what we worked on today was just kind of something that he could do in his home where he's working through the baseball as far as gathering momentum with his wrists and hands towards first base so that there's no wasted movement and we're going to have less steps towards first base. Then we moved into how we're going to get our feet moving towards first base after we focused on just our hands. So we got up off our knees and started fielding a short hop towards first base. I'm happy to run through all these things, guys. It's a lot easier for me to show you on video. And then what we would do is we'd do a backhand and we'd also do a forehand. And I personally do those things daily because it puts my body in a position that when I get into a game, it just happens naturally. I'm not even thinking about it at all. So, yeah, I mean, what I would do is start off with very easy things that are just kind of reminding you where you're supposed to go, and then you add a different difficulty level to that by standing up or, using a glove or no glove. Those are things that we do in the minor leagues as far as infielders. Pitching-wise, neither of us are pitchers. I'm not going to harp on pitching at all because I know that somebody would roast me, and I would probably roast somebody that was trying to talk about pitching if they never had pitched before. But what I can say is this: we have multiple first-round draft picks in the last year, even sooner, that are on the site, and they're happy to run through what they're doing as well as far as prepping for this season. They're also in limbo. I mean, you have to understand that we're all in the same spot here. We're not able to train really the way that we want to. We should be in season right now. So I think if you want any help getting a suggestion for the right pitcher for you, I'm happy to go through that. All you have to do is send me a DM or message me or whatever you want, and I can kind of take a look at what your kid is looking for and match you up with the right person. So that's really what I'm going to help you with there.
That's it.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. I think that's what we got today. I'm happy to do this. I'm going to continue to do this. So if you guys, weekly, I'll probably be on here. Maybe I'll bring on a different guest, but Jacob and I are more than happy to answer any questions. So feel free. We're probably going to post again at some point and just say, what type of questions would you guys like answered this week? And we're going to run through those things. But really, thank you guys so much for listening. And, if you want to tell somebody about this, again, we're always happy to help any way we can.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it. You'll hear more from us. Stay safe and stay healthy.